We're going to be looking at Exodus 13, and just to anticipate something, and this will be coming textually. There were three major feasts, and there's other feasts and activities, but the three major feasts, and let's do this in terms of the New Testament, is going to be Passover, and then Pentecost. Pente is 5. So Pentecost is going to be 50 days after Passover. And then you will go into the fall. And the Feast of Booths or Tabernacles was celebrated in October. And before the Feast of Booths and Tabernacles was the Day of Atonement in October. And that was the significant day in that only once a year the high priest was allowed to go into the Holy of Holies, and that was the Day of Atonement. This is all going to be much later than where we are in Exodus 13, but all of these are also agricultural festivals. If you notice, state fairs, the further north you go, it's going to be a little bit earlier in terms of our fall state fair. And let's just say we're in Galilee, and especially if we're a rural community, the barley always ripens 5 to 6 weeks earlier than wheat does. Out in western Oklahoma in August, this is using our calendar here, my dad would sow rye. We had a really sandy farm, and he would just put the stuff at the deepest level, and he just called it eating dust. I mean, just dust would come everywhere, but the dry seeds would be in the sand, and then when the rain come, then they would germinate and just come right out. With the wheat, you had to wait until you had moisture to put it in the better land. But he would always, in August, and I'd check with him, he'd say, "Son, I've just been eating dust today." And it didn't matter how dry it was, he would just put those rye seeds as deep as the drill would put them, and then they're already there, and then when the rain comes, then they sprout and they come up from there. And so the rye would be ahead of the wheat crop because we got it in earlier. Well, barley is the same way in terms of the ripening features of it. And so typically the barley harvest would finish, especially in Galilee, before Pentecost. Now, let me take a step back. At least where we're out in the wheat belt and stuff going north. Once wheat harvest comes, everything stops. You don't repair things, you don't go fishing, you don't do anything else. And you'll see the trucks and the combines and everything else and trying to get it out before the next hail and the next rain. And just the wheat harvest starts down in Texas and ends in, some of these guys will go all the way to Canada. And that's just a huge feature of people being able to stay on the farm and stay alive and other stuff. Well, in Palestine, the barley harvest would typically be finished, and it's going to be another 4 weeks or so before the wheat is ripe. But after the barley harvest is finished, then we go to Jerusalem, especially the guys, and we have the Feast of the Passover. While we're gone, because it's roughly from here to Tulsa, and you just think, how long would it take you to walk from here to Tulsa? And especially if you've got wife and kids and other stuff, that's going to be a major trip, one, getting there. That's going to be a major trip coming back. But anyway, while we have gone for the feast of the unleavened bread and the Passover, which we'll be looking at again tonight, then the wheat harvest has ripened, and we go back, and then that 50 days between Passover and Pentecost, the wheat harvest comes in. So we go through and everything stops. We drop everything. We get the wheat harvest done. And guys, when we get all the wheat in, we kind of go, okay, time to go to Jerusalem again. And so then the journey would be made down to Jerusalem. And so those first two festivals coincided with the agricultural crops. The Feast of Booths and Tabernacles is going to be in October, and just always think of the state fair. There's always different kinds of pumpkins and crops and everything that have been brought in. And so when you get all of everything from stone fruit to apples, all that kind of harvest type thing has taken place, you finish that, and then we go back to Jerusalem again. And we'll anticipate this later, but all three of the major feasts then coincide with the agricultural cycle of the year that's around them. And so tonight we're just going to be looking at the events that led to the feast of the Passover. And we're going to go back just a little bit in Exodus 12 and read some highlights, and then read the section in chapter 13. So here's our central idea. God put several events on Israel's calendar to remind them of the Exodus. And obviously the Passover is going to be a major one. But like, for example, the feast in the fall, tabernacles or booths, they would build shelters. Has anybody gone to a Boy Scout, Girl Scout jamboree? Tents, every kind of campfire food that you can imagine. I just swallowed nearly all the time I was there because all these things are being cooked around you, and there's things, smoking meat and all this other stuff, and doing all kinds of activities. Well, you think we finally get the last harvest done, and we all kind of go, and then we go camp out in Jerusalem in October before it gets really cold, and we worship and we eat and we feast and do all these things. But we build shelters, tabernacles, to remember, the Israelites camped out in the wilderness. The Israelites came out of Egypt, and that wandering took place. And so this event of the Exodus is kind of firmly imprinted in all of the major festivals and feasts, and they will continue on, at least the Feast of the Passover. Well, and I'm saying in terms of killing the animals and stuff, give me a half second. It will continue until August of 70 AD. And that's when the Romans destroyed the temple. And so from the time of Moses, which is roughly 1500, then the people are going to keep this event. And memory. We're going to do, it's important for the adults, but a big part of this is to help the children remember certain vital things about this is who we are and this is where we came from. We're going to drop back to Exodus 12 and we'll just read down to 13. Exodus 12:29. And I literally have just shuddered when I've read this. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. And you just kind of stop and think, oh dear, this is just going to be household after household, tragedy upon tragedy. From the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne and was a type of deity in the Egyptians' mind, to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock. This is a huge emotional loss, and it's a huge financial loss.
Does this include the firstborn females? It doesn't specify, but when you read chapter 13, it talks about the males.
Yes, it's my guess is, I assume it's going to end up being the males, in that's going to be the ones that God's going to redeem later when it comes up. Excellent question. And if anyone sees different, then let us know if you find something else. But that's my understanding, is that it would be the firstborn of the males. So Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians. There was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. I mean, just think about when you had your kids at home and you go in and the firstborn's dead. I mean, this is just, I just don't even have the vocabulary to explain how both sobering and heart-wrenching that this will be all across the board. So it'll be the servants. He's going to summon Moses and Aaron up, go out from among my people, both you and the people of Israel. Go and serve the Lord as you have said. Take your flocks and your herds as you have said, be gone. And isn't this interesting? The guy whose heart was hardened by himself initially, and then by God after that, and then he says, and bless me also. We're not told if Moses did or didn't, agreed to or not, but it's very clear this is just the urgency of the moment, and the catastrophe that happened is the impetus to finally say, okay, go. And the loss that is just going to be all across Egypt is just nearly incomprehensible. So, 1233, the Egyptians were urgent with the people to send them out of the land in haste. They said, we shall all be dead. The people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls being bound up in their cloaks on their shoulders. And the people of Israel had done as Moses told them. They asked the Egyptians for silver and gold and clothing. The Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they let them have what they wanted. 1237, they journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. And notice this, a mixed multitude also went with them. So there's going to be a whole additional group, and it doesn't say that they're all Egyptians, but they're not Israelites. And just kind of keep that in mind, because that's going to be an ongoing part of the story as it unfolds. And very much livestock, flocks, and herds. They baked unleavened cakes out of the dough they brought out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt and could not wait, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. The time that the people of Israel lived in Egypt was 430 years, and at the end of that, to that very day, all the host of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It was a night of watching by the Lord to bring them out of the land of Egypt. So that same night is a night of watching kept to the Lord by all the people of Israel throughout their generations. Now, we've touched on this, and it'll come back later. Lord willing, next week is going to be the crossing of the Red Sea. Give me a half second. I'm having to process. In the first chapter of Numbers, the number of fighting men is 603,550. And so when I look at that, and I think fighting men is not going to include guys with a cane, and it's not going to include little boys, and then that doesn't include their moms, their sisters, their wives, and on and on. If you have 603,550 fighting men, it's easy for this to be a group of nearly 3 million people. I mean, and we talked about this, but just let this sink in. This is like getting the whole state of Oklahoma on foot, and we're headed toward Arizona. I mean, can you even imagine? And whatever you had if you grew up in Bible school, you have to have kind of both sides of the Red Sea to get the people across, but it has to be vast to get this number of people across, because you just stop and think, even if it's, and I'm not trying to be facetious, even if it's only 2 million, how wide is it going to have to be to get 2 million people across on the other side? And again, sorry, this kind of says something about age. I have pictures from flannel graph in Bible school, okay? And so you've got to have both sides for it to make sense and on and on. But then when you get to reading this is going to be a vast spread for the people to be able to cross. But then you get to looking, they've got their livestock, they've got all this other stuff. This is just the most amazing act of deliverance that has ever been known in the world. And mentally, you just kind of look at that and kind of just start processing it, and it's just mind-boggling, the vast number of people. And then you stop and think, and how much is that many people going to eat in one day? What are you going to do for water? I mean, this is a bit silly, but our church at Eastside Midwest City has fed the Carl Albert football team Friday before games, and the booster club pays for it. And Coach Rose came to me, I don't know, turn of the era, I don't know if it's 99 or 2000. And he says, do you have any idea how much trouble 70 boys can get in between 4 o'clock and getting dressed on Friday afternoon? Coach, do you have any idea how much trouble 70 boys can get into? He said, if they're all at your church building, 1, we will know what they had to eat. 2, we will know where they are. They haven't had time to get involved with any girls or have a fight with somebody else. And if your church will provide the facilities and the silverware, we'll pay for everything else. And then here it came. He said, we just want fed but not full. Okay, if you fix lasagna for 70 to 90 football boys, and you say, amen, can I do industrial vacuum cleaner and go, and in about 10 or 15 minutes, it's gone. Everything's gone. Head toward 2 million people and start feeding 2 million people. Do you begin to see the magnitude of what I'm trying to help you to see? This act of deliverance just virtually boggles the mind, one, in terms of what it's going to require to get them across, but things have just started once we get them across. Trying to feed and care and look after the water, the hygiene, and everything else, it's just virtually staggering. So here we are in chapter 13. The Lord said, consecrate to me all the firstborn, and whoever is the first to open the womb among the people of Israel, both of man and beast, is mine. And then back to your question about the females, the fact that Egypt, can I use the term, lost their firstborn in the act of deliverance, then God says, while they are saved physically, the firstborn in Israel is mine. And so you're going to have to redeem, we're not going to try to kill them, but you're going to have to redeem the firstborn among Israel. And it's just kind of like there's two different things going on that both relate to that. So here's chapter 13 and 3. Moses said to the people, remember this day in which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery by a strong hand. The Lord brought you out from this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. Today, in the month of Abib, you shall go out, and when the Lord brings you into the land of, and here's the nations, Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Hivites, and Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give to you, a land flowing with milk and honey. You will keep this service in this month. And here's what's important. The Feast of Unleavened Bread is 7 days before Passover. And they virtually just kind of merge together because they have a lot of things in common. But it's not just the event of the Passover meal. For 7 days before that, then you're to eat unleavened bread. And by the time we get to the New Testament, there's descriptions about how the night before all this started, ladies, you would light candles and stuff. If you have little kids in the house, little crumbs of bread can be anywhere. A bit of toast here and all this other stuff. And the process was you go through the house and you try to, if you can find anything that's leavened, it comes out of the house. And so you just stop and think, how different are the meals going to be for this whole week where you have nothing that's leavened on the table. And in fact, you're not having any of the leavening stuff that's going on in the house. And so 13:7, unleavened bread will be eaten for 7 days. No leavened bread will be seen with you, and no leaven shall be seen with you in all your territory. You shall tell your son, and see here it starts, this is for the kids, over and over and again. All of these activities, yes, they obviously apply to the adults. Can I use the word visual aid? And I'm not trying to be inappropriate with that, but the whole process of this, just this visual thing, you stop and think, if if you're 8 years old and then for a whole week there's no toast, there's no biscuits, you know what I'm trying to say? Whatever's the normal fare in your house, everything is unleavened for this whole week. And at some point, Junior's going to say, Mom, why? Or Mom, where's the that type of thing. And this provides a teaching opportunity for you then to be able to say, well, this is why we're doing this, and this is how God has asked us to do this. You will tell your son, well, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. And it will be a sign on your hand and as a memorial between your eyes, that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth, for with a strong hand the Lord brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this statute at its appointed time from year to year. When the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, which he swore to you and your fathers shall give it to you, you shall set apart to the Lord all that opens the womb. So it's going to be the firstborn of the family, but it's also going to include the livestock. And then notice this, all of the firstborn of your animals that are males shall be the Lord's. And here's the exception, every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb. So if you get a firstborn donkey, he's really healthy, and you want to preserve him and keep him, then a sacrifice of a lamb to redeem that one. I don't know why. A couple of guys said because beast of burden and used probably agriculture and other things. But all the other animals, the firstborn is the Lord's. And that's going to be an ongoing statute for 1,500 years, at least as God had asked them to do it. If you will not redeem it, you will break its neck. I mean, this is pretty serious stuff. Every firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. And when the time comes and your son asks you, well, what does this mean? You shall say to him, by a strong hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery. When Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both firstborn of man and animals. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all the males that first opened the womb, but all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. It shall be a mark on your hand and frontlets between your eyes, for by a strong hand I brought you out of Egypt. Don't quote me on this, but I think from Deuteronomy it's going to be 5 shekels of silver as the law develops and unfolds in terms of redeeming the firstborn sons that are part of that. But notice how many things that happened the night of the death of the firstborn in Egypt is then going to be carried over into the religious history and traditions of the Israelites for generations to come. 13:17. Pharaoh let the people go. God did not lead them by the way of the Philistines that was near. And if you leave Egypt and go right up the coast, the Philistines have probably come from Crete. The Old Testament word is Capitor. And the Philistines have already settled in there on the bottom part of the coast. God said, lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. But God led the people around by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea, and the people of Israel went up out of the land of Egypt equipped for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, God will visit you, and you shall carry up my bones with you from here. Last chapter in Genesis, chapter 50. So they moved on. They encamped on the edge of the wilderness. And I just kind of get the chills when I read this. Try to visualize what this says. The Lord went before them. During the day, it is a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and at night, a pillar of fire to give them light. And again, how much wood would you have to have for campfires to be able to do stuff after dark with this many thousands upon thousands of people? So the cloud by day gives them guidance and protection in that sense. And then the pillar by night gives them at least some ability to function and do some things because of the reflection of the light that comes from there. So the pillar of cloud by day and the fire by night did not depart from before the people. So the narrative of the events of the first Passover evening are told in such a way to provide a memory for Israel and future generations for the deliverance of God's people by a mighty hand. I don't want to get off on this too far, but especially while our kids at home, every family needs certain traditions that our family does to help establish faith within our kids. And that's that's an ongoing thing, and there's virtually a whole class that can be taught on that. One of the things that we did, and excuse me, I always tell parents of small kids, one of the most important things you can do is read to your kids. And our Bible story started the first night Luke came home. We literally just started having a Bible story, doing questions and doing stuff. We didn't get a lot of response that first 9 months, but we still, we read every night. And then as they got older, if I had to be gone for something, I'd say, okay, now, matey, you need to lead the study with your sisters tonight. And this is where we are. And we had this wonderful little book called Jesus, the Friend of Children, that has these gorgeous pictures in it. And our kids virtually had that memorized because we started reading that and going through that. And that was just a part of the evening activity. And all of these things that we're going to see coming up, yes, they remind the adults this is what God did, but you're to do these so the children can be taught, here are the things that are going to happen, and here's why God did this, and this is the future generations. So the very bottom, the events leading up to Israel's departure in the word Exodus from Egypt are told in such a way to remind future generations of what God did to deliver his people on Passover evening, a night that is different from all other nights. I didn't write this down, but it just crossed my mind again. Do you remember when Moses and Elijah come and meet Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration? Luke, Dr. Luke says, they came and talked to him about his exodus from Jerusalem. And I always find that just so interesting. Moses and Elijah appear to Jesus, and their conversation is, here are the events that are going to take place, Jesus, before your, and most of our English translations appropriately will say departure. But when you look at the text, the departure is spelled E-X-O-D-U-S, and they're talking about his spiritual departure, his exodus from Jerusalem. And here again is tying together the history of the past with the ongoing work of God. So 1-2, God remembered his covenant with Israel's forefathers in the past. And remember in chapter 6 and 5, I've heard their groaning. I remembered my covenant. And then he says about the Passover, remember this day in which you came out of Egypt. And look at what the prediction was. And we're going back again to Exodus 6 and 6. I am the Lord, I'm Yahweh. And notice these things. I will bring you out from the burdens. I will deliver you. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great acts of judgment. So Israel is shown celebrating the Passover before, okay, the first Passover is going to be before the Exodus, because remember, they're going to kill the lambs and put the blood on the sides, the lintels, and the tops of the door. You cook the lamb, all these instructions that were given. And so the very first Passover celebration is before the Exodus from Egypt. And then it has it anticipates this type of thing. And later generations are to celebrate the Passover after the Exodus as a memorial. So a quick quote, this is 1:6. No festival of the Hebrew Bible better epitomizes the ritualization of the past in order to shape and preserve group identity than does the Passover in relation to the memory of the Exodus. And then just stop and think. I'm in the upper room with the apostles. Do this in what? Memory of me. And there's that same function. The Lord's Supper is going to function for us each week in that memory capacity. And yes, there's different perspectives about it, but that part is an ongoing thing. We said this very early, but just notice it again. The name Yahweh, this is from the burning bush, the priority of his presence, I'm now among my people, over his existence. He's always existed. And this El Shaddai, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob knew, yes, he is strong, he's mighty, he's powerful. But from the burning bush on, and one of our Old Testament teachers said this, he said, God is going to declare a war on idolatry at the burning bush, and it's going to take him nearly 1,000 years to win. But when the exiles come back, and we're going all the way down into the 500s, when the exiles come back, Israelites typically have never been involved in the idolatry in the way that they were through the rest of the Old Testament. And so I am present, I'm in the midst of my people, therefore you shall have no other gods before you. And all of those things that happen within the Ten Commandments are there. So here's 2:1. God led his people in such a way that Pharaoh will make one more fatal mistake. He will seek to capture Israel, return them to captivity. And these two things, the pillar of fire by night, the cloud by day, are visible symbols of God leading his people. And here's a quote. Yahweh's guidance must be seen not primarily as a guidance from something, but instead as a guidance towards something. And you think, this is true in all of our lives. This whole thing, and this has been so true in Ephesians, but it's in all the letters, no longer do this, do not walk in the darkness, but we are created in God's image to do good works. And there's this constant emphasis, yes, this is what we're taken from, but it's not just that we stand neutral. Now that we've done this, this is what God is wanting to do. And even as late as Isaiah, he's going to have this wonderful description. Israel was to be a light to the nations. And as far as God was concerned, it wasn't just only about them, but it was what he was doing with them and through them to be the light to the nations, and a guidance toward something is very important. 2:3. God's personal guidance of the people's journey toward the promised land is very visual. And again, just imagine a cloud by day, a pillar by night, signifying his continual presence among his people. The symbol of God's presence could either guide or illuminate the path forward. And it was also there, especially at the Red Sea, to protect Israel from their enemies. And so this was explicitly guidance and reassurance of God's presence. And this will take us into next week. The route that the people took left the impression they were wandering aimlessly and would be easy prey to return to Egypt. God had his own reasons because he didn't want them involved in military skirmishes. But this is going to cause Pharaoh to think, we can go and capture the people and bring them back, which is going to be the events that are going to take place next week. So we're down in number 3. The final act of deliverance from Egypt included the death of the firstborn in each Egyptian household. God's instructions concerning the need to sanctify to me every firstborn was a reminder that Israel's deliverance from slavery was the death of the firstborn. And just stop and think for a second. What was true of a nation in Israel is going to be true in the Gospels with the death of his firstborn son. Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. The type, the shadow, and the reality, and it's going to come up very specifically in terms of the redemption and the saving of God's people through the cross. But since God spared the firstborn children and the animals, they belong to him. And notice this term redeemed. Genesis 48, an angel redeemed me from all evil. We'll go to the back page. Here's this word in Exodus 6:6, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. The firstborn of a donkey you will redeem with a lamb. If not, you will break its neck. Every firstborn of men among your sons you shall redeem. Exodus 13:15, Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go. The Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. And then there's the term again, I will redeem. And if you'll notice, here's this term, Israel is delivered by the strong hand. And these are two sections from chapter 13. You came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, for by a strong hand the Lord brought you out from this place. In time comes when your son asks, what does this mean? You shall say to him, by a strong hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery. So notice this, and I didn't want to just do a whole timeline. I place Abraham approximately 2000 BC. And again, the easy way to remember that is Abraham is as far before the cross as we are after the cross. Moses is going to be roughly 1,500 years later, but just do the genealogy. You do Abraham and then Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. So you're moving closer to that period of time as the book of Genesis ends. And just before the curtain closes in Genesis, Joseph very carefully says, before he dies at 110, take my bones out of Egypt when God delivers you. And I'm confident that the people in his generation just had no idea what that's going to mean and how many centuries it's going to be before God fulfills that. And this is why, when I've told you earlier, you can read the Old Testament biographically, personality, second level, the nation, and then you read the third level, God. And Joseph is confident, even before the Pharaoh arises who knows not Joseph, that the time will come when God's going to bring the people out. And of all things, the book of Joshua, after they've gone in and conquered the land, is going to close with the burial of Joseph, probably in the area of the tribe of some of his great-great-great-grandsons. But what an amazing statement of faith. If I say mummified, I don't know, we don't use the terminology, but preserved in the traditional Egyptian fashion all of those years. But Joseph is very specific. Do not leave me here. When God comes to deliver you, carry me out. And so one of the things that Moses is going to do decades and decades and even centuries later is that they also then are going to carry the bones of Joseph out. So this is under 4. God's people went to Egypt in Genesis. In Exodus, God is proving his sovereign faithfulness by bringing Joseph and his family out of Egypt by his strong and mighty hand. And there again are those two signs. A couple of things from the Psalms, and notice this. 103, bless the Lord, O my soul. All that is within me, bless his holy name. The Lord works righteousness, 103, verse 6. His justice for all who are oppressed. He made known his ways to Moses, his acts to the people of Israel. Psalm 105, and let me just mention this. The fourth book of the Psalms is going to go from Psalm 90 to 106. The two big themes in the fourth book are Psalms about creation. God made this and God did all of this. And then God's history, the history of God's people. If he is mentioned 7 times in the book of Psalms, Moses, 6 of them are going to be in book 4. And who better than the person who wrote the history of God's people during this particular time? So Psalm 105:26, he sent Moses his servant and Aaron whom he had chosen. They performed his signs among them and miracles in the land of Ham. And then here comes the whole list of things. They struck down the firstborn, the first fruit. They brought out the people. They didn't stumble. Egypt was glad in verse 38 when they departed. He spread a cloud for covering, a fire to give light by night. But look at verse 42. He remembered his holy promise and Abraham his servant. So he brought out his people with joy, his chosen ones with singing. He gave them the lands of the nations. They took possessions of it, that they might keep his statutes and observe his laws. Praise the Lord. Now, if you've been in classes before, I just do this all the time. And this will happen, Lord willing, probably in the fall before we come back. One of my Old Testament teachers said, always notice the first time a word is introduced to us in Scripture. And you look up the word sing, sang, or song. And I would assume, before I started looking, somewhere in the book of, the first time the word singing is used is with Miriam and the Song of Moses after they crossed the Red Sea. So if you notice the parentheses on the left side, the first song is Exodus 15:1. Then Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to the Lord, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and the rider he has thrown into the sea. Okay, just my nature, I have to then go check, when's the last time sing or song is used? And guess what? They sing the song of Moses. Isn't this amazing? The first and last reference to singing in the Bible initially is, we've been delivered from the Red Sea, the Egyptians are dead. Miriam and Moses sing this song to celebrate their release, their freedom, their been saved out of captivity, etc., etc. And then guess where the last time singing is used? 2 words describe the citizens of heaven, and one is saints. The sanctified ones, the set apart one. The other is servants. Those 2 words are used about 13 times to describe the citizens of heaven. And can you anticipate what it will be like to sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, the song of the Lamb, saying, great and amazing are your deeds, O Lord the Almighty, just and true are your ways, O King of the nations. And I always just find that absolutely amazing. And that's why in my mind I just do this parentheses in this way. And here again is this providential thread of God working all the way through. And the very first song, and I'm sure somebody sang before that, and I'm sure families may have done that, but the first specific reference to singing then is the celebration of the deliverance that God has delivered us in the Red Sea. The Egyptians are washing ashore and all this other stuff is happening, and they're going to sing the song of Moses. And then the last reference is for those who have been saved not at the Red Sea and not from the Egyptians, but from sin and from the world and from Satan, then they are the ones who will sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb. And I'd just like to say, don't miss the singing.
Dempster's not